Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking into a really pivotal and frankly brutal moment where Cold War politics met decolonization. We're talking about Patrice Lumumba.
Right, the first democratically elected prime minister of the Congo. His life and his calculated murder.
Exactly. And how it was all covered up for, well, decades. The sources we're drawing on, particularly the research in the Assassination of Lumumba, point to this incredible level of international complicity.
It's a story of, as the sources put it, arrogance, greed, and power. Really chilling stuff when you dig into it.
And our sources are pretty clear. The Belgian government, they bear the main responsibility for the actual murder in '61.
No question. But our mission today, for you listening, is to unpack that whole web. It wasn't just Belgium acting alone.
Not at all. We need to understand how others, big global players like the U.S., maybe the CIA, and even the UN, played these critical roles. They kind of enabled it, created the conditions for it.
They created the environment where, from their perspective, his elimination seemed, well, necessary, almost inevitable.
So to really get it, you have to go back to the beginning, the high point. June 30, 1960, Congo Independence Day.
Huge moment. Lumumba, this incredibly dynamic nationalist figure, he'd done it. Prime Minister of a new nation.
And his goal was massive. A truly unified Congo. Free from colonialism, yes, but also, crucially, free from neocolonialism, from outside control.
That vision, that ambition, it barely lasted. It crashed almost immediately.
Tell us about the ceremony. King Baudouin of Belgium was there. It was supposed to be this dignified handover, right?
Right. Baudouin gives his speech, very planned, very, well, patronizing, all about Belgium's supposedly noble civilizing mission.
But then Lumumba steps up. He wasn't necessarily scheduled to give this kind of speech.
No, he just seized the moment, and it was electrifying, but ultimately fatal for him. He didn't just thank the Belgians. He basically put them on trial right there.
He talked about the reality, didn't he? The humiliation, the forced labor, the racism.
Absolutely. And he looked right at the king, essentially, and said that under colonial rule, the law recognized only the right of the strongest. A direct hit.
Wow. How did the king react?
The reports say he turned livid, just furious. And for the Belgian establishment, this wasn't just an insult. It became symbolic. It cemented their view. Lumumba had to go. He was a threat.
And that speech really kicked off the spiral, didn't it? Segment 1. The conflict begins.
It did. Soon after, Lumumba called for the Africanization of the army officers, replacing the white Belgian officers with Congolese. A logical step for an independent nation, you'd think.
But Belgium jumped on it.
Immediately, they used a few minor incidents, some unrest, as a pretext, claimed they needed to protect Belgian citizens, and the troops intervened.
But not just anywhere. They went straight for Katanga, the richest province.
Precisely. July 11th, Katanga declared secession, splitting off from the Congo. And Belgian troops and officials were right there, supporting it, enabling it.
And let's be clear about Katanga. This wasn't just some random province.
Oh, no. It was the jewel in the colonial crown. Basically the private kingdom of this huge mining company, Union Minière.
Copper, cobalt, uranium, all the wealth was there.
Right, the entire economic engine. And we even have Colonel Van de Waal, a key Belgian figure there, admitting later that the unofficial goal of Belgium's intervention wasn't safety.
What was it then?
His words were basically to keep operating the productive machinery. Keep the mines running, keep the profits flowing back to Belgium and its allies. It was about money and control.
Neocolonialism, pure and simple. But they couldn't exactly say that publicly.
Of course not. So you get the Cold War framing. Suddenly, this isn't about copper mines. It's about fighting communism.
They painted Lumumba as a Soviet pawn.
Exactly. The propaganda was intense. Brussels, Washington, they started talking about saving Africa from the Cold War, containing Soviet influence. Lumumba's nationalism, his desire for real independence, was twisted into this narrative of communist takeover.
A very convenient narrative.
Incredibly convenient. It allowed them, especially the U.S., to justify working against Lumumba's legitimate central government, sending money, support, diplomatic pressure, all framed as anti-communism.
Destroying Congolese nationalism became strategically reframed as defending the free world.
Precisely. And it meant they could ignore Lumumba when he asked for help.
Which leads us right into segment 2, the international complicity, the UN's role, and the actual overthrow. Lumumba and President Kasavubu, they asked the UN for help, right? Against Belgian aggression.
You did, immediately. It seemed like the obvious move. But the UN's response, led by Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld, was, well, disastrous for Lumumba.
So what did they do?
Hammarskjöld adopted this policy of neutrality. It sounds fair on the surface, but he decided to treat Lumumba's elected government and Schoen's Belgian-backed secessionist regime in Katanga as having, quote, the same constitutional rights.
Wait, the legitimate prime minister and the leader of an illegal secession treated as equals?
That's how it played out. And the effect was devastating. It meant the UN peacekeepers, the Blue Berets, couldn't actually help Lumumba put down the rebellion. They couldn't intervene against Schoen.
So the UN's neutrality actually protected the secessionists.
That's exactly what the sources argue. It consolidated Katanga's split. The UN forces became effectively an obstacle to the reestablishment of territorial integrity. They were stopping the central government from restoring order.
Unbelievable. So while the UN is effectively hamstringing Lumumba,
The Belgians were moving ahead with a much darker plan. It went beyond just supporting secession.
we have proof of this.
We do. There's a specific directive dated October 1960 from the Belgian Foreign Ministry, Internal Communication. It explicitly called for Lumumba's elimination, his definitive elimination.
Not just contain him, but eliminate him. That's policy from the top.
Policy from the top. And it wasn't just secret memos. You had figures like Prince Albert, the king's own brother, publicly blaming the entire crisis on just one man, Patrice Lumumba. The target was clear.
So the international stage is set, the Belgian plan is in motion. What happens inside Congo?
Well, the internal politics were messy, and the West exploited that. Colonel Mobutu, who was definitely getting support, money, logistics from the U.S. and Belgium, he launches a coup in September 1960.
And sweeps Lumumba's government aside.
Just like that. But here's the kicker. The UN's role in facilitating that coup.
How did the UN facilitate it?
The sources show UN officials on the ground immediately closed the airports. Crucially, they also shut down the national radio station.
Cutting Lumumba off from his supporters.
Completely. He couldn't broadcast, couldn't mobilize people. A key UN official, Andrew Cordier, even admitted later they took actions that went, in his words, as far as we can to affect situation favorably and stay within the terms of our mandate.
Favorably meaning helping the coup succeed.
That's the clear implication. Favorably meant stopping the nationalists, stopping Lumumba. The UN's actions were instrumental in making Mobutu's coup stick.
So by late 1960, Lumumba is overthrown under arrest.
Right. He and some allies end up detained at Camp Hardy in Thysville, effectively a prisoner. Which brings us to segment 3, the final journey. January 1961.
He's a prisoner, but still a powerful symbol.
Hugely powerful. And that became clear in mid-January 61. There was a mutiny, an uprising among the soldiers guarding him at Camp Hardy. Some of them were pro-Lumumba.
That must have caused panic.
Absolute panic. In Leopoldville, where Mobutu was, and definitely back in Brussels, they realized, even locked up, Lumumba is dangerous. He could still inspire resistance.
And that sealed his fate.
It seems so. The decision was made right then. Get him out of Thysville. Transfer him somewhere. Well, somewhere he wouldn't survive. Katanga or maybe South Kasai, both hostile secessionist areas.
A death sentence, basically.
Everyone involved knew it. The transfer order itself, the communication, it's chilling. There's this coded radio message from a Belgian official, Marlière, to Elizabethville, the Katangan capital.
What did it say?
It asked for Jew's agreement to receive Satan. Yeah. Jew was the code for Schoen, the Katangan leader. Satan was Lumumba. They were arranging the delivery of their prisoner to his executioners.
Just horrific. And the transfer itself, January 17th, 1961.
Carried out quickly, secretly. The UN wasn't told. And the flight itself. The sources describe appalling brutality. Lumumba and his two companions, Mpolo and Okito, were beaten relentlessly by their guards during the flight.
So they arrived in Katanga already badly injured.
Witnesses said they were more dead than alive, just brutalized. They were taken to a place called the Brouwes House, near Elizabethville.
And the abuse continued there.
Oh, yes. Both Katangan guards and, significantly, Belgian officers participated. This wasn't just random violence. It seemed systematic, vengeful.
And high-level Katangans came to see him.
They did. Ministers like Godefroy Monongo, even Chom himself, apparently visited the house. It was almost like a spectacle for them.
There's that chilling quote from Monongo, isn't there?
There is. Monongo reportedly said directly to Lumumba, something like, Lumumba, I told you in Brussels that if you set foot in Katanga, you would piss blood and your head would roll at my feet.
It just shows the premeditation, the hatred.
Absolutely. It confirms this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment killing. This was planned vengeance.
And the execution happened that same evening.
That same evening, January 17th. It was organized by a Belgian police commissioner, Frans Verschuur. Other Belgian officers, like Captain Gat, were involved. alongside Katangan soldiers.
And Lumumba himself. Any accounts of his final moments?
The accounts suggest he faced it with remarkable bravery. Witnesses reported extraordinary courage.
But killing him wasn't enough for them, was it? This leads to segment 4, the cover-up.
Right. The cover-up was immediate and incredibly macabre. They needed to erase him completely.
This involves another Belgian police commissioner, Gerard Sautet.
Yes. Soeten and his brother were tasked with disposing of the bodies. And what they did, it's hard to comprehend. It shows the lengths they went to.
What did they do?
First, they had to dig up the bodies from the shallow graves where they'd initially been buried. Then they cut the bodies into pieces with a hacksaw. And then, over several hours, they dissolved the remains in drums of sulfuric acid. The goal was simple. No body, no evidence, no shrine. Erase him from history.
It's beyond words. And didn't Sautet keep souvenirs?
That's one of the most disturbing details. The sources confirmed Sautet kept 2 of Lumumba's gold teeth and apparently a bullet fragment from his skull as personal trophies. He called them relics.
Just sickening. So how did they explain the disappearances publicly?
They concocted a story. The official announcement claimed that Lumumba, Mpolo, and Okio had escaped custody and were then killed by angry villagers in some remote area. A complete fabrication.
How did the world react to that story?
With outrage. There were massive protests internationally. Embassies were targeted, particularly Belgian and U.S. ones. People blamed them and the UN for failing to protect Lumumba. The lie didn't really hold up under scrutiny even then.
But did this outrage change anything for the Belgians involved? Were there consequences?
Not really, no.
Yeah.
In fact, years later, King Baudouin actually granted titles, honors, to several of the key Belgian figures who were involved in the whole Congo operation during that period.
Rewarding them.
Certainly looks that way. Rewarding the people who helped secure Belgium's interests by, well, getting rid of Lumumba. A final insult, really.
Despite everything they did to erase him, Lumumba left behind his own words, his final letter, his political testament.
It's incredibly powerful, written when he knew his time was short. He talks about his unshakable faith in the Congolese people and the future of the country.
What does he say about history?
He says that history will eventually judge. And significantly, he says it will not be the history taught in the United Nations, Washington, Paris, or Brussels, but the history written by Africans who have freed themselves from colonialism and its puppets. A history written in the Congo itself. It's a message of enduring hope, despite his own fate.
So wrapping this up, the key takeaway from this deep dive seems pretty clear. Lumumba's death wasn't just chaos.
Not at all. The sources paint a picture of a calculated political murder, seen by the Belgian establishment and enabled by others as a kind of necessary evil to protect their interests.
Specifically, their neo-colonial economic interests in Congo's resources, masked by Cold War rhetoric.
Exactly. It was about control, about money, about stopping genuine independence before it could really take root.
And the final thought to leave our listeners with, it comes back to that idea of history, doesn't it?
It does. They killed Lumumba the man, but his image, his ideas, they became this potent symbol of nationalism, of anti-colonial struggle. He's still incredibly relevant.
So the provocative question, Maba, is this. Lumumba believed his people would eventually write their own history, free from outside control. 6 years on, how much of that struggle he embodied the struggle against the same kinds of economic and political dependencies that led to his murder? How much of that is the ongoing story in the Congo today?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
How far has that history actually progressed? It's a lot to think about.
Indeed. That's all we have time for on this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.